So our opening keynote is Dr. Sean Lessard. Sean is from Montreal Lake Cree Nation in Treaty 6 Territory, Saskatchewan. He's an award-winning writer, international speaker, and researcher in the field of Indigenous education and youth. Sean is an adjunct professor at the University of Regina and associate professor at the University of Alberta here in Edmonton. Sean has been awarded the Pat Clifford Emerging Researcher Award by the Canadian Association for Teacher Educators, as well as being an American Educational Research Association's Early Career Award winner. His work focuses on Indigenous youth empowerment and leadership, including the development of his not-for-profit Indigenous Youth Bursary and Wellness Program that has contributed over $150,000 in the past 3 years to Indigenous high school and post-secondary students in Canada. To me, Sean is a dear friend. He's someone that I have the greatest respect for. He's someone that has just done incredible work. He's the most humble, amazing person that you could ever meet. And I am just so, so grateful to call him my friend. And I know that he can do anything in the world, including show up on the screen. So with that, I would like to turn it over to the wonderful and amazing Dr. Sean Lessard. I will be monitoring the chat and we will be taking some questions and doing a little bit of a Q&A at the end of Sean's keynote. So welcome, Sean.
Welcome. Those are beautiful words, Charlene. Just for those of you, I've been panicking right now trying to get the Zoom piece going on. I was texting Charlene before this started and I said, hey, she goes, Sean, you can come on now. And I just said, well, I'm out of Wi-Fi. I'm out of Wi-Fi minutes. I don't have any Wi-Fi right now. And I just left it at that to see how she'd handle that. And I think I got her heart rate up going quite well tonight. So I thought it was funny, but it's not so funny. I think Charlene's right too, is that we are getting better in this, well, some of us are getting better in this kind of virtual world. I'd say I'm like, my training wheels came off after a semester of teaching. My attendance at my university classes has never been higher because they tune in just to see the spectacle every week. And it's horrible pedagogy what I'm doing. I'm calling people out by accident because it's so silent, and they laugh when I try to screen share, and I try to get a little bit fancy and show a video, and things just break out in all kinds of strange ways. But I'm getting through it, and I'm trying my best, and I'm learning from this. I sure would be better to see people, but we are where we are for now, and I can only hope and imagine that things are getting better for the future. Today's been a really long day. I just got off a board meeting with, I'm the Spirit North board with, it's all about youth wellness and something I've grown very fond of in my life. And even in the most difficult moments in life, in struggles in different ways or challenges in life, especially during COVID, if I always go back to thinking about youth and the reasons why I came to this work, that'll never lead me astray. That's what I think. And I'm thinking about that right now. I'm thinking about back home in my home community of Montreal Lake Cree Nation, where Woodland Cree and Treaty 6 territory. It's on the way to La Ronge, and got a chance to do a little bit of work with my community because, quite frankly, we're struggling, significantly. We have a crystal meth issue in our community, and we have some major addiction issues. And the only way to confront that is to try to think about ways to live well or to move well together. So I've been working with youth this year to try to figure out ways what we could do. How can we imagine this? And I engage with Spirit North as an organization who does cross-country skiing and mountain biking and movement on the water and canoeing and paddling. And so we've been writing grants madly for the youth in my community. And I was pleased to announce tonight that I found a little bit of money, and some of the things that I'm even doing with a little speech like this. We're going to buy mountain bikes for every single kid in Montreal Lake Cree Nation. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak, Charlene, because I'm going to use that to contribute to actually the ability to get bikes for kids. Small things matter, and I know it's a small thing, but it would make me happy to go back to my community in the north and to see kids running through the trails and on bikes and playing and imagining and having fun once COVID, gets over. And even when it's not, just to go outside and play and let the imagination run free. That's what we need children to do. That's what I'm thinking about mostly these days. So I'm going to start this piece. It is kind of like a foundational piece, and I speak about other things these days, but I haven't spoke a lot because of the way things are in the world right now. But I like to go back home to think about this foundational piece of my life as an educator. It's a piece called The Red Warren Runners. And some of you might have heard me speak about this, but it was inspired by young people in Keynote Cree Nation, a community I continue to work with in the present. Right now, currently developing and designing an arts academy there, and among other things, always having fun and trying to think about this. So I call this the Red Warren Runners. So start with a story, end with a story. That's an ontological commitment in a different way. Sometimes 5, sometimes 18, one time 30, but every day through August, the Red Warren Runners have been inspiring me as we shuffle, sprint, and navigate our way down the dusty roads of Enoch Cree Nation, always wearing red t-shirts, that is. It's a beautiful thing to experience, and we always start at the local school in the town site, stretching, slowly getting ready for a run. Sometimes I love this daily ritual, other times I loathe it. Depends how my body's feeling, but we stick together through this one day at a time. Girls, boys, young people, and older people like myself make this trek daily throughout July and August. Sometimes we run 4 kilometers in a day, and we make sure to always jog by the community health center and the band office. It's interesting because now people wave at us when we jog. They used to look at us with mistrust. There was doubt in their glances. They quietly shook their heads as they saw youth move in a different way. I like visiting with the youth about the run and how it feels. They say they love it, and now I'm starting to believe it. As they log their kilometers and look towards the poster to see how far they're going, to see how far they've been. Did I tell you? You should see these kids run. It's beautiful, no training, no fancy gyms, just a town site, bumpy dirt roads with truck imprints embedded in the earth. Then the sandy gravel of the back roads toward the potato plantation. It's our target turnaround always. Wheat fields and canola fields are on each side. They seem to be our only fans some days, and they seem to wave us on when we move. You see, there's no judgments there. We run and the youth tell me they've never done this before, never seen the fields as I describe them, never seen the beauty of them like I do. I'm hoping and thinking they see it now. I'm hoping they see something different within themselves. We're all in a line, a long red line, staying as close together as possible. And when the Red Warren Runners take off in the distance, it's magical. It takes me home every time we run, home to the gravel roads and the farms of my youth, to the wheat fields and barley fields and the beautiful sounds and smells that I can no longer imagine in the city. We talk about treaties, families, relationships, and the beauty of creation on those morning jogs. We are simply moving knowledge, as Basso might say. It's a living curriculum. They talk about the familial curriculum acknowledged. I did not think the kids would continue, but it goes to show you how much I don't know. They showed up every day and even run on their own these days. Red Warren Runners will continue to be on my mind as the leaves get ready to turn. The farmer swaths down the majesty to the left and the flowering yellow to the right. It is indeed a beautiful thing, one I won't soon forget. I hope we all keep running. Sometimes 5, sometimes 18, one time 30. Today it's just me. The Red Warren Runners have inspired me as I shuffle, sprint, and navigate my way down the dusty roads of Enoch Cree Nation, wearing red t-shirts always. I start that piece as a reminder, I guess, about what matters and what counts. And I've said this speech many times. I read that piece at the end of August after I spent time with these young people, and they call themselves the Red Warren Runners. We wore red t-shirts because the color of our school's colors were red, and quite literally the dusty roads of Enoch Cree Nation, I wanted people to be able to see us. People say, well, Lessard, that sounds simple. You just set up a running club. Well, it really had nothing to do with running, because in fact, I hated the running part of it. That was the youth idea. They wanted to start out something in a good way together, and really to get some exercise and move in a different way. Literally, the whole experience started with 2 young women from Enoch Cree Nation who came up to me when I was a guidance counselor at Jasper Place High School and said this: Lessard, we want to graduate with our friends. Can you help us do something different? And my simple teacherly response, privileged response, I'd say an ignorant response, was, yeah, I'll help you get signed up for summer school. And you know what they said to me? They said, Lessard, you're not listening. And I noticed that the title of the presentations of the conference has a lot to do with listening. And maybe I was listening a little bit in a teacherly way, but I certainly wasn't listening with my whole body or attending to what they might be trying to share with me. I think I did that a lot as a teacher at times when I was working in a school, trying to not always thinking about the life, sometimes thinking too much about subject matter. And that really doesn't matter when the subject should be youth, it's lives. They said, Lessard, we want to graduate with our friends. You don't understand because we have no transportation. We live in Enoch, our parents work. There's no transportation in the summer. So how could we possibly go to summer school at Jasper Place High School? Small things matter. That's a big barrier. I was fortunate enough to have a female principal that simply put a challenge out to me and said this, is that Lessard, think outside the box. I know you can figure this out. Just do it. Just trust yourself. Well, isn't that a nice thing for a leader to say to a teacher and guidance counselor to trust yourself and try to imagine something different and just go for it. No barriers there. We weren't thinking about policies and these kind of pieces. We thought about safety, of course, but the actually freedom of expression for a leader to tell somebody to try doing something different was the most unbelievable gift that I could receive. So she gave me a small budget and I tapped 3 teachers on the shoulder that I knew that could think differently. I talked with the young people and I talked to the young people's families. We started with 2, then we went to 5, then we went to 18, then we went to 30. But the whole point and purpose that changed things for me, that was a foundational and fundamental shift for me, is that we weren't going to allow them to come to Jasper Place High School to take summer school. I picked 2 non-Indigenous teachers who could think with me differently, and we decided to take our show on the road. So we would be the people not at ease, at dis-ease, I would call it. So we were to teach in Enoch Cree Nation. We actually taught in a man by the name, one of my good friends, Bob Cardinal's garage. We taught in Enoch Cree Nation. We taught Aboriginal studies, math, and a wellness kind of offering. We taught through July and August for 4 hours a day. We ate together every single day. We drank tea together. We ran together. We shared together. We talked about things that we never imagined talking about, but we stayed with it. Only one student didn't make it through that experience, but it wasn't his or her fault. They had other things to do. But I try to tell that story when I kind of get lost in my maze of work and life and all the other things, is that to always remind myself about what matters first and what counts first. I'm happy to say right now I'm in the midst of planning meetings. That was, as I think the time's gone by so fast, that was 15 years ago. Many of those young people are in leadership right now. They're in leadership and they're in all kinds of worldly jobs in Enoch Cree Nation. They're big leaders, managers, moms, dads, but community members that are loving in such beautiful ways. They hired me to come help them imagine high school again. Their guidance counselor, who was their teacher and guidance counselor, came back to the community 3 years ago. And I'm happy to say for the last 3 years, we've engaged in a summer school offering around land and place and treaty and language and just pure relational ethics at play. It's been unbelievable. It takes me home every single time, but it reminds me again of what I was only missing, what I was missing so much at times when I wasn't truly listening with my whole body. Red Warren Runners. I thought it'd be a good way to start off today as we think about some of the challenges, even with this new environment, and when governments ask us to pivot, I think it's more of a radical turn, that's for sure. that some of you are making, that many of you are making, but you're keeping with it. And I just want to encourage you to let's keep going and do the best that we can, even if we only have 2 kids in our class. That matters. I write in this piece when people ask me about some of the challenges, and I don't have a prescriptive 5 to 7 point plan. Those people who know me, I don't really think about that way, but I try to think with my head and try to think with my heart and my whole body on some of these pieces. And I think about when I'm in school, that at times when I'm trying to work with youth, and when I was a teacher and when I transformed into what some maybe would call being in a leader position, is that the ability to understand that at times there's no space in school as the institution to move in different ways with young people, to truly understand and listen to some of their stories as I focus solely on subject matter and try to cover it and get through. I'll leave this slide if you can read that upside down and all the way around. We regret to inform you there is currently no space or place for abstract painting. What a disastrous world that would be if we didn't have the space or place for abstract thinking and thought, the space or place to be messy and to let our imaginations take over and do what we know best, alongside youth. And then people ask me, well, Lessard, what do you do? Give us that 5-point plan, what you do in schools. I said, I don't have a 5-point plan, but one of the things I try to do is I try to think about who I am in relation, and I try to gently disrupt what's happening, gently disrupt the schedule, the 80-minute blocks at times, the 60-minute blocks at time, disrupt to find cracks and openings to try to think differently alongside youth, even if that means it's something as simple as having a cup of green tea with a young person. Even if it means sitting in a different place where you usually don't, or disrupting your own rhythm as an educator, maybe not hanging out in the staff room and hanging out in a space that is occupied and preoccupied by young people, listening in a different way, I suppose. Find your space, I encourage teachers, find your space. And they ask me, what does that even mean, Lessard, to find your space? Because it's this surreal concept that's abstract and it's not real, but sometimes your space is turning inward to the quietness of your own thoughts and really thinking about who you are in relationship to the larger picture. Sometimes it's going for a walk in the trees where an elder like Elder Bearhead would tell us to go talk to the trees, I'm imagining, sometimes, to continue to find ways that fill our cup so we can keep that good energy working with young people. These days, I'm more about when I'm working with communities. Currently, I work with 6 different communities across Western Canada, and I try to come in there and I try to do a better job as an older person now. Maybe my younger person self would have all these great ideas, but that's not listening, I've learned. So try to co-create space, alongside community, co-create space alongside young people to try to more fully understand some of their story, some of their experiences. Those experiences are shaping identity pieces that help me be a better educator. They help me understand important things like the protocols and the rhythms and the geographical stories that exist in particular places. Understanding that you can't put FNMI in a box and truly, that is a reductionist box, and we have to try to find other ways to understand the stories that animate and that live within young people. Understanding that we cannot generalize. That's what I guess what I'm trying to say, is that each young people has a rhythm, each person has a rhythm, each person has a story that is definitely worth paying attention to. This story, that's my second daughter. She's 11 years old now. And when I speak to people in other places, I was thinking at the Toronto District School Board, I was speaking, I put this slide up for the first time because they couldn't quite understand why an Indigenous person was speaking to them about education, because I just don't speak about Indigenous education, I speak about education in general. So you mean we could talk about reconciliation and all those pieces, but I think as educators, if we could find a common ground when we drop our kids off for the very first day of school and we turn them over to the school, to the teachers and the educators in that building, I think regardless of color or sexual orientation or our stories and narratives, that we'd all want the same for our children. I think that's the one common place that I definitely we could agree to attend to. I think about this story, and I'm looking at Sedona, and she's 11 years old now, and she loves school. But I remember in grade 1 when I talked to her teacher, and the teacher was just so concerned with telling me about the literacy and the numeracy scores, and I appreciate those. That was interesting to me. But you know, my most important question that I wanted to know: does she have any friends? Does she seem to have fun when she comes there? What kind of things does she do? You know, what kind of drawings does she create? And the teacher said, Lessard, I can't even tell you. I actually don't. Yes, I'll have to think about this. Yes, I think she has some friends. I said, I understand numeracy and literacy are important, but I think those other things matter too. You know, my biggest question was, is she sustained in the place of school? You know, is her heart happy in that place? And I think that's what we'd want for all our kids, you know. And these were better times with no masks, I suppose. And there's me with my sloppy jeans and my Montreal Lake Cree Nation post-secondary jacket. It looks like I got a box of donuts there too, to the side of me. But that was her first day of kindergarten. I've had a chance to reflect on some of the pieces, and people will say, Lessard, like, what brought you to education? Like, what are some of those broader questions that you're thinking about? And I've had a lot of time to think, you know, especially during this particular time in life. I'm thinking about, I call it animating life transitions, and thinking about all the life transitions that we're engaged in. And I thought a lot about the timeline of my life in education and school. And my first teacher, the first teacher I fell in love with that inspired me was my grade 6 teacher, Miss Smart. I thought about, how did you even get to working with young people in this way? And the common piece in my life was that inward turning that talked about youth, working with youth. And the work that I've done with youth started, for the most part, always outside of school. And I think because I worked in the community, not as a teacher, as a youth worker, as an advocate, or whatever you want to call me, but I was always in the community working with youth in recreation and wellness and intervention and mental health. But learning from the community pieces to work with youth in a different way has shaped me in profound ways, because it makes it difficult for me to sometimes work within the institution of school, because I know if I have kids outside in different places, that the walls of the school don't shape the experience. They don't shape our understanding of each other. I suppose, to be more clear, I think we can move in different ways, and I can build relationships in different ways. And they're not underlined with subject matter content. The subject matter, I'll say once again, is the life, is animating the life, and beginning to understand a little bit about theirs and a little bit about mine in a world travel sort of way. But I'm thinking about that youth working and stories of that, and you mean different stories pop in my mind. And I thought about the Boys and Girls Club. See, I grew up in Montreal Lake at the very beginning of my life, but my mom had significant addiction issues in her life, and my late mom. So what would happen in my life is I'd start off in Montreal Lake, and then I'd get shipped out to a place, and then go back to Montreal Lake for a little bit, then shipped out to a place, and that would be kind of like my life transition. And then finally I got put on the free agent waiver wire, and I got adopted into a non-Indigenous family, a white family in rural North Battleford, Saskatchewan. So I got to grow up in this farming place. They picked the wrong person though, because my dad was so profoundly disappointed that as I'd walk out into the field with a pair of flip-flops on and in a muscle shirt with no muscles, he'd say, go back in and put some clothes on, please. What is happening here? He was so disappointed to get a boy that wanted nothing to do with farming, that's for certain. My mom ran a tight ship. She was a 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock kind of person, supper kind of person, 7 o'clock is breakfast kind of person. And she encouraged me strongly, recommended me to get a job, you know, when I was in grade 11. I tried. I failed. I didn't get picked at McDonald's. I put an application in there. That would have been beautiful, but nothing there. But I looked at this clip in the News Optimist in the newspaper, the local newspaper, and it said about working with kids. I didn't read the whole piece, but I did put an application, and I think it felt like I was applying for unemployment insurance. I just had to prove to my mom that I was actually trying to get a job. And I applied for this job, and at supper one evening, I got a call from a woman. That itself is a foreign experience in itself, you know. And my mom answered the phone, and she goes, some woman's on the phone for you. She wants to talk to you. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know who that could possibly be. And it was the Boys and Girls Club. And they said, Mr. Lessard, we received your application, for the job, but I think you're missing 1 or 2 pages. I said, no, I don't know. My resume was fairly scant. You know, I did some babysitting, and I shoveled some grain for my dad every once in a while, and I did some work with kids in a couple different places at camps. But so they said, Mr. Lessard, are you missing something? We like some of the experiences. We'd like to talk to you further. They said, so tell us about like your degree. I'm like, my degree? I don't have a degree. I'm in grade 11. And they're like, what? Yeah, I said, I don't have a degree. They said, then why did you apply for this job? I said, it said working with youth. I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring, and I thought, you know, I maybe have a shot at it. Mr. Lessard, you applied for the director of the Boys and Girls Club in North Battleford. The director, you mean you need a degree? We appreciated this conversation with you. We love your enthusiasm, but it's not going to work at this point, but try again later. But I think the reason why I tell this story is I must have known somewhere, somehow in my life that I'd be working with youth. That's a true story. That's a true story. My mom was very proud of me for taking a chance, taking a risk. My mom's narrative runs deep in my life. Both my adopted mom and my biological mom, who has since passed away. But my mom seen a pattern of behavior, I suppose, as a high school student, and you know, trying to make a life in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. She asked me in grade 12, my grade 12 year, what my plan was. I said, my plan? What do you mean my plan? For next year, what's your plan? I want to know what is happening post grade 12. You see, my mom was the best guidance counselor. I think we should look at more moms as guidance counselors in all kinds of ways, because they really get us to more truer definitions of ourselves. She goes, so what do you mean by you want to take a year off? I said, well, yeah, I want to play some hockey, going to work on that. And I'm really working on my relationship with my girlfriend. You know, I think we're going to develop that a little bit more. And she goes, so I'm going to take a year off, reflect on life, and see where it takes me. So she pulled out of a bag a stack of books that you would not believe from every college you can imagine. Keep in mind, I had a 50% average right across the board at this point in my life. And she says, you're going to pick a college by 9 o'clock tonight. And the only rule is it's got to be 1 hour away from North Battleford. And I said to my mom, why would you make it an hour away when there's a college like 15 minutes down the road? I think you missed the point. It's going to be 1 hour away, and you're going to pick a college by 9 o'clock. I said, sounds like you're asking me to leave. No, I'm just gently pushing you out, she said. So I don't know what to say to that. That's looking at your life in all kinds of different ways, you know, to pick a college in 3 hours. And unbelievably, I don't know how this happened, but I actually did find a college. Something struck me at Lakeland College where it talked about rehabilitation / youth work. And I'm like, hey, maybe my experience in the Boys and Girls Club, or the lack thereof, might be informed by here, and then I can, you know, circle back around, get this education thing, and go back to the Boys and Girls Club. I wasn't thinking that thoughtfully, but I did see that maybe there's some possibilities there somehow. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what the lines look like. I think I'm probably like a lot of young people. I'm probably like a lot of you yourselves. We don't always know where things are supposed to go, even though we have our best intentions at times. Pick a college, pick a college. So I had to write an essay, and one of the pieces that you had to do is you had to volunteer in some way, shape, or form. So I ended up volunteering for 3 Saturdays at a shelter workshop. As a 17-year-old, I spent time at a sheltered workshop not knowing anything about myself. I was a selfish 17-year-old who thought hockey was the only way forward, which it certainly was not. At sheltered workshop, I spent time with folks with physical disabilities, with developmental pieces, but they were just human beings trying to make a life in this place. And I can remember my discomfort. I could remember how much I felt at dis-ease, not knowing what was happening. So I wrote my essay after those observations and time spent, and I got accepted to Lakeland College. Fortunately, they had a cognitive assessment tool that showed that I could read despite my 50% average. I managed to get a volleyball scholarship there, which helped with my funding. I didn't have band funding, contrary to what the dominant narrative in society would say about First Nations people having education paid for them. There was no such thing at that point in my life, that's for certain. So I had to get a job. There's a routine here: get a job, pick a college, keep going. And I found a job as a respite worker, as a youth worker. And my job was to take care of a nonverbal boy with spina bifida and to wake him up and feed him breakfast every morning, to give him a bath, and to get him on the bus. After school, to pick him up, to take him out for recreation, to have a snack, to have a supper, to change him, to give him a bath, to read him a book, and to put him to bed. I was 17 years old in that first year of college. Halfway through, I turned 18. But for the first time in my life, I had to attend to somebody different than myself. I was a youth worker working with a youth that couldn't speak, by the way. He was nonverbal. When the title talk is talked about listening, I started to learn to be able to listen and pay attention with my whole body. I think that was one of the best skills that I learned from this particular experience, because I knew when Jeremy was happy. I knew when he was sad. I knew when we had fun. I knew when I gave him a ball that he'd beam, but he couldn't say it to me with words, which is what most human beings were always looking for. We need that feedback. We need to hear something back. We crave it. But he taught me that the silences are okay, and that you could pay attention and figure things out when children are happy, even when they don't talk. What a great job that I had. $6 an hour, every day, 5 days a week, and it changed my life. He put me through college, that young man and his family. I remember his favorite things was airplanes. His dad was a pilot. What a great experience that I can draw on all the time. At 17 to 19, I graduated. I was the youngest person in that class. Lakeland College, it was a beautiful place to learn and to try to imagine something different for my own life. And right after that, I took the radical turn and I hitchhiked to Victoria, British Columbia. And I began to sell fruit on the side of the road and pump gas at the Petro-Canada at night. And it was the most amazing summer experience. I remember how disturbed my dad was. My farmer dad with a grade 6 education, my adopted dad. When I phoned him and said, "Hey Dad, I graduated," and he said, "Okay, you're gonna come home to the farm?" And I'm like, "No, man, you lost your chance at me. I'm selling fruit on the side of the road. You should see it out here in Victoria, Dad." And then he hung up. Keep in mind that this was not the time of cell phones. So I had to go get another pocket of change to phone him back and ask him if we just lost disconnection. He said, "That wasn't disconnection. I physically hung up on you. You went to college for 2 years. You're the first person in our family to go to college. And I'm handing you a farm, but you said, no, you want to go sell fruit on the side of the road." And I said, "Absolutely, yes." Because I could tell the difference between oranges and grapefruits and all kinds of different fruits. And I'm just loving it that I've meeting people all over the world. Dad, this is unbelievable. He didn't hang up the second time. I was smart enough, I suppose, even though I wasn't very smart or worldly, but I put an application in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan before I left to Victoria. In the very late end of August, I got a phone call in Victoria from a program manager of a place called the Main Street program in Saskatoon. And it was a storefront school for young people who had been kicked out of every other school. And the goal, I guess the broader goal, was to get them back feeling well, to transition them back to regular school. You can guess and you could bet that most of the folks in that school were Indigenous youth. Many of the youth homeless. The storefront school was located on Broadway in Saskatoon, and many of you probably understand where that is. It's a mini White Avenue, I suppose, being generous when I say that. I'm thinking about that travel back to Saskatoon and trying to find what I thought a school looked like, and looking at a storefront brick building and a shady side door, and opening the door, and there's a vintage green couch that I'll always remember in my mind. And a woman was there named by the name of Laurel, who turned into my boss, and another amazing female leader who asked me every single thing about education, but never ask me about school, never asked me about subject matter, asked me about selling fruit and all the other things in between. She also said she used to travel a lot. She used to be a hippie way back when, and she appreciated what I did, just taking a risk and seeing something different in my life. She offered me the job, and I learned the most amazing things working alongside her. For example, to never look at the behavior, but to look sideways. She taught me to never look at the behaviors directly, even if a kid swears at you, but to try to understand what they're missing or why they're hurting. What a way to learn to walk gently alongside young people and to try to pay attention to where the hurt's coming from. She had a master's in educational psychology, and she taught me that the person matters first before the subject matter. I'll never forget that. 1,234.62, 1,234.62, 1,234.62. I kept every stub from my first work experience from that place. That's how much I got paid. And I thought I was rich. And you know what? I was rich. I was rich in experience. There was no bills, no big bills, no pressures, no stress, just the journey and the experience of loving what you do. 1,234.62. In the second year, Laurel said, "You can't come back here anymore, Sean. You're getting too comfortable." I said, "Why can't I stay here?" She goes, "Because you got to do something different. You need to go back and be a teacher." And my response, as a person who didn't understand what university was and only thought that university was for the smartest and the best and the brightest, was that I can't do that. Nobody in my family goes to university. She said, "Well, I need to teach you about some of the things at university because you could go to university." And so this white woman, this non-Indigenous woman, who was my boss, took the time from her family and the time from her own medical health issues that she struggled very deeply with, to take me to the University of Saskatchewan once a week, to sit in coffee shops, to go to like music pieces and symphonies that I would never, ever go to or feel like I belonged, to sit in a library and show me how to look at books, to sit in her friends' lectures, to learn about what that looked like. 1,234.62. By the time I was ready to apply for the U of S, I knew that place inside out. 1,234.62. Guess what? I had no money or visa. You need a visa to apply to university. Guess who used their visa to help with my application? My boss, a non-Indigenous woman who wanted to help out somebody. We wouldn't call it reconciliation back then, but I'd call it having a kind heart and seeing something different within a person. I will never forget that generosity, and it's been a shaping influence in my life. I signed up for the Indian Teacher Education Program, and guess what? I learned to love the library, and I was an honor student for the first time in my life. And some of those pieces, they just lit a fire in me about learning, which I've always appreciated. Kept on going and eventually went to U of A and got a degree, and from a degree went and studied master's at night in educational psychology, and then my PhD. I'm the first person back home in Montreal Lake to get a PhD, but that doesn't matter anyways, because all the people there have PhDs on the land anyways. That's just a piece of paper. But I like to help out in any way I can by understanding that other part of the world. We collaborate all the time. Jobs, you never know what you're going to get, when you're done your schooling. And once again, and we're probably in a similar time in the province right now, there was no jobs. So I graduated in Edmonton and there was no jobs coming out in January. So I did what I knew best. I applied as a teacher assistant / youth worker at a beautiful place, at a beautiful school. Woodside Institutional Services. How do you like that as the name of your school? Institutional Services was the name of the school I applied for, and I got a job as a teacher assistant. And I was so happy as a teacher assistant. I remember phoning my mom back home on the reserve and telling her, and she goes, "That doesn't sound like a school." I said, "Well, it is a school. It's a school where kids who can't go to any other school get moved to this school. And I suppose they get kicked out of these other schools and they have to go there because they have some things that are going on in their lives." Woodside Institutional Services, my first job. Just got to work alongside an amazing educator, a female kindergarten teacher that taught me a lot. But I only got to spend time with her for 2 weeks as a teacher assistant because the principal came and talked to me and he said, "Lessard, are you an educator?" And I said, "Yeah, I believe the children are our future." He said, "That's a Whitney Houston song." So I was giving him my educational mission and vision. He said, "I'm asking you, maybe I'll slow this down. Do you have a degree in education?" I'm like, yeah, actually I do." He goes, "Then why did you apply to be a teacher assistant?" "Because I wanted a job and there was no jobs." And he goes, "Well, guess what? You got a job." And I said, "That's awesome. I'm obviously, like, you know what my resume is. I'm a humanities background, secondary education." He goes, "I didn't say that." He goes, "You got a job teaching kindergarten." And I said, "No, I'm not teaching kindergarten. Little kids hate me. I don't know how to read books backwards. I don't know anything. I don't know how to make boards nice and pretty. Like I don't know how to do any of that. I don't know what manipulatives are. I don't have scissors. I can't do this. I don't know how to teach kids to read. Little kids hate me." And he goes, "No, you're doing the job." And I said, "No, I'm not doing the job." So my principal, he's telling me I'm doing the job and I'm saying no. And then he said, "Lessard, listen, there's only 2 kids." And I'm like, "Okay, well, 2 kids? I can do that. How hard can it be to teach 2 kindergarten kids?" Once again, the lesson for today's story is I wasn't listening. 2 kids, 2 elementary kids, 2 kindergarten kids. It's January. How do you get kicked out of other kindergartens in school and it's only January and you're in kindergarten? I never thought about that. That's one. Secondly, these 2 kids, we didn't have to worry about attendance. It didn't matter. Their moms dropped them off every single day. They were there every single day. The kid had a broken arm and the mom said, "He loves you so much, he needs to be here." And I'm like, I don't think so. He tells me every day he hates me, but they made it every single day. These 2 little guys. I still have the picture. And I think this was a little unnecessary for the school district or the school itself, is that we got Jostens. And it's a picture of me and my 2 sons. They're like in a formal picture with the benches, with kindergarten K1. Hey, I still have that picture. And I could see those little boys just looking at me just with despise, just filled with all kinds of vigor. It was the longest kindergarten year of my life, 6 hours a day. And there was no, sometimes it did not seem that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but our attendance was through the roof. And I learned a lot. I learned that you should read an IPP. See, some people say that you shouldn't read IPPs, that you don't want to make judgments on kids and all these pieces. But I was also reading at that time Harry Wong's book that said, talk gentle, come down to their level, don't be, too big. Like you gotta You have to have pauses and silences and talk gently. And I remember, we'll call him Emil. I bent down and got low by his desk, and I tried to just talk softly and kind of whispered in his ears, which sounds really weird now that I'm saying that out loud. But I said, "Hey, little buddy, do you want to do a little bit of reading or a little bit of math?" Well, that kid punched me in the face so hard, he burst my nose open and the blood was pouring out. He hit me harder than Jose Bautista was hit in that baseball game way back a long time ago. And I just went flying out of the classroom, and my principal goes, how did this even happen? How did you get beat up by a kindergarten class? You have 2 kids. What kind of classroom management do you have? How is this possible to happen? And I said, well, I bent down, got low, talked in, I whispered in this kid's ear. And this principal just looks at me. Did you read his IPP? I don't make judgments. I don't write reading IPPs. I don't want to make judgments on kids. That's bad practice. His IPP simply states that he has a trigger and he has an ear issue, an inner ear issue, and that's a trigger for him. He goes, now what you're going to do for me is you're going to wipe yourself up. I said, well, this kid's got to get in trouble. No. That kid's not going to be in trouble. Wait for me after school. I can't wait till I'm going to sit here. I want you to phone his mom and tell him that you whispered in the kid's ear and you triggered him to punch you in the face. That was the longest day possible. And thank goodness that beautiful mother, she forgave me for triggering her child and letting him punch me in the face. But that's my kindergarten story. And for anybody who spent time in kindergarten, I applaud you. I love you. I appreciate you. I think of you, and what a experience that continues to play on my mind. I got recruited really shortly thereafter to Jasper Place High School, where some of my job was to design programming, unique programming to teach. Always, of course, they wanted me at that point to spend time and try to figure out ways to engage with the 250 First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students that attended a school of 2,600. I believe there's 3,000 young people at Jasper Place High School now. So I'm thinking about that and trying to figure out my teaching life and trying to figure out a way, to engage. And one of the wise practice suggestions was Lessard just call them down at the beginning of the school year, every First Nation student and Métis student, and just talk to them about stuff. I thought to myself, why would they want to talk to me? Why should they talk to me? What do I have to offer? I can't sing. I can't dance. I can't do any of those pieces. I can't teach kindergarten, that's for certain. I don't think they'd care about my selling fruit stories. But the most important thing I thought about that is that, have we forgot what it's like to be in high school? Can you imagine being hauled out of your class because you're First Nation or Métis self-identified and come down just for no particular reason? I think you get there over time, but that's not the starting point. That's not wise practice and best practice that they were telling me there. I doubled down and said, I'm not going to do that. I said, if you gave me one block of time, by the end of October, I could have an individual conversation, a cup of tea with every single one of the young people that are identified as First Nation or Métis. And I'll tell you stories and I'll share pieces that we can begin to understand a little bit more about what they're missing and what we need. But before I do that, guess what I'll be doing? I'll be asking their parents or guardians if it's okay to talk to them in a good way. And I won't talk to the kids until I talk to the parent or guardian so they know who I am and what I'm about and what my intentions are. That made sense. And I, once again, in the spirit of this conference, I had a leader that said, go for it, Sean. Yes, it costs money to do the right thing. They gave me a spare, but it shifted so many things, right from policy to being able to smudge in our school, to be able to develop a youth leadership group, to be able to do things that I know now are right, because I go back there 15 years later and guess what? They're still happening in even better ways, because I was just one person and now we have other people that are thinking about doing things differently. And that's Indigenous and non-Indigenous educators trying to think about what some of this could possibly be imagined to look like. I called this action research. This was before I was a researcher. I called it 250 conversations. So my philosophy was simple. If we find a reason or reasons to be connected, we are more likely to stay and let it become a part of a personal process journey. Guess what? I think the same thing is true for educators. So in our schools as leaders, if we can imagine that 250 conversation kind of philosophy with a cup of green tea between us, sitting at a round table with nothing fancy, if we could find more reasons to become connected in schools, we are more likely to stay and let it become a part of a personal process journey. So when we're talking about the lives of teachers and the lives of youth, I think they're intertwined. When I'm thinking about Indigenous teachers and Indigenous youth who so often leave. I wanted to co-create with youth the forward-looking story of life in and beyond high school. I didn't use the word retention anymore because my question shifted to what sustains you. Maybe a better question is, what fills your cup, some people say. So what sustains you, not what retains you. See, sustaining is living, retaining is flat. That's an object to me. So when we're in an institution, in a building that sometimes lacks spirit, I want to think about what sustains a person, what keeps them able to keep on coming back with their backpack, and do they have a place to put their backpack down? I can't stand watching Cree teachers in schools walk class to class with a shopping cart full of supplies. That to me is probably one of the most disrespectful acts, because that's a very not sustaining way to keep it going, to keep dreaming, to keep imagining, to keep the energy flowing. Things I'm thinking about these days as I get a little bit older. I just put this up because we need more round spaces instead of sharp edges in schools. And sometimes when you have those 250 conversations, you begin to find out what matters and what sustains young people, like the outdoor places of their home place, the protocols and the beauty and the seasonal rhythms that shape them. Some young people will find out that they came from a more urban setting, and that hip hop and music and art and creativity and chaos also matter. And many times there's a blurring in between, because we know young people have all kinds of lives and all kinds of identities and all kinds of forward-looking stories that are shaped by many influences, not just the generalization that we may think as adults. So we have to travel to their worlds, and in turn we have to allow them to travel to ours. And I'm thinking about this person, Michael Swampy, and his nephew Jaron. Some people might know Michael. Michael's in my graduate class right now at the University of Alberta. Michael's family came and talked to me when he was in grade 11 and said, "Can you look after my son? Can you look out for him?" And I didn't even know how to tie my own shoes as a teacher at that time. But I always did look out for Michael to try to find other ways or small connections. And he was a brilliant athlete, and he's a brilliant young man. And this reason why I have this slide, and it's so old school, but we had no money. But the only way I could help to remember some of the stories was I said, "Tell me what matters to you. Tell me some things, some stories to live by. Let's make our own posters. We don't need to get a poster of somebody else, some role model. You guys are role models yourselves, you folks, you people." So I just got a white piece of paper and we took pictures. But this was in my binder so I could remember the 250 stories. And then I'd call the kids out. I said, "Remember what we talked about? Your imagine looking story. We don't fit the stereotypes. Let's live that way here." Grade 12, Michael came to me when he was graduating. He said, "Hey, old man, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to be a social studies teacher, just like you." And he goes, "When I'm done, have your job ready for me." I like that. I dropped Michael off. I helped Michael look at the college. I remember dropping him off and getting him signed up for college. Similar to the experience I had as a young man myself so many years ago at the University of Saskatchewan. What matters to you? What counts? What sustains you? Michael Swampy knocked on my door a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, old man, is your job ready? I'm graduated from the University of Alberta." Michael always says I'm a younger, faster, better version and better looking person than you, Lessard. He reminds me of that all the time, and I do tip my hat to that. He is all those things and so much more. So I have the privilege of spending time with him as my graduate student right now. I shouldn't say my graduate student because that's ownership. He's a student that I work with, and we are, his master's is going to be on wellness, Indigenous youth wellness. And then we go home to Story, entering Montreal Lake Cree Nation, my home place. And I talked to teachers in North Battleford, Saskatchewan today about trying to find ways to understand the unique histories, the geography, and to understand the complicated histories in places like North Battleford. But I say you have to metaphorically and physically map the landscape, begin to understand where young people come from and who we are in relation to that. Places matter that sustain us. This is the old barn on the farm where my dad knew a long time ago that sports would matter to me. He filled that top up with sports. But I know that not all our young people have places like that. So I was a privileged kid. So we have to try to figure out other ways that we can imagine some forward-looking spaces. And it might be something as simple as an art canvas that you bring from the dollar store with a few paints that allows somebody to escape into something beautifully radical. And then we go to the stories of our name, the personal social. I talk about Lessard Road. This is near my farm. And we had this, at one time it existed. I was teaching a class at the University of Regina and I was showing this slide and a young woman in the back was like, Lessard, I got a confession to make. I'm like, well, can we talk? There was 250 people there. Can we talk about it later? And she said, no, I got a confession, Lessard. I said, well, can we wait till lunch? She goes, Lessard, my name's Lessard. I'm like, oh no. Maybe my dad has a love child back home. I don't have tenure. Please, can we share this story privately? And she said, no, we're not related, Lessard. But she said, Lessard, you know that sign? That sign right there? At grade 12 night, my friends and I took an axe and we chopped it down. It's in my bedroom right now. Do you want to see on Instagram? I said, no, I don't need to see that right now. You keep the sign. It's good. It's all good. But I'll never see that sign again. But the reason why I put up the sign is because I talk about the layered landscapes of our names. And it is so important to honor young people's names. And so we can walk 10 feet tall, so we can believe, and we know we believe that our names matter, that they come from very important places. My name back home, I'm a kingfisher in a city in a different place. My people are from Woodland Cree, and we're from Sturgeon Lake and Montreal Lake Cree Nation. And I've learned over time that my stories matter too from this other place. Even though some of the stories were filled with pain and hurt and addiction and some of the things that are struggles, my family's beautiful. They hold their language, they have PhDs on the land, and they welcome me home always, regardless of whatever's happened in the past. Do you know what else is a really important indicator? See, on the res, we don't mess around. That's a steel sign. I'm not having anybody chop this thing down. You need something much bigger than that. Kingfisher Road in a different place. There's a geography in all our stories. That's Montreal Lake Cree Nation. And that's not just an Indigenous thing. So I always encourage people to return to the geography in their stories and to think about that as a sustaining story to live by. I miss that place. I'll get back there soon. That's the Rapids, where my people gather for many, 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 many years in their lives. This is where we come together and all the pain of politics and all those things are no longer. That's just a slide that says straight lines, and I don't believe in straight lines. Jasper Place Leading Spirits. A small group of young people, after we had a cup of tea, decided to start something different. Leading Spirits. They're still going. And sometimes we need more circles in our life with young people. I got a job at the University of Regina, and I knew no one, but a person who watched a speech gave me $20,000 to start up something with youth. So we started something called Growing Young Movers. It's been going for 10 years now. 26 youth high school leaders participate in a 5-day-a-week after-school program teaching kids in the North Central Regina. And sometimes you don't need anything fancy just to spend time with kids. You just play in the trees. This is in Mikisew Cree Nation. There's a bear actually running around in the other place behind you can't see. And I was uncomfortable playing chase games with bears, but these kids it did not matter to them. More circles, less squares. And I'll close with this, that sometimes 5, sometimes 18, one time 30. Today it's just me. The Red Warm Runners have inspired me as I shuffle, sprint, and navigate my way down the dusty roads of the Enoch Cree Nation, wearing red t-shirts always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. That was so beautiful, and I was just lost in your stories. And I think that we're seeing, you know, such amazing response to you, and this just makes me miss you more, buddy. Like it's been a long time, you know, with COVID and everything else, and I'm just so grateful that you were able to take the time here to touch so many hearts and so many minds, and I think that people see why it's so important that we try to spend time with you any time that we can, because your advice, you're right. I mean, this whole experience being with you answers that question that you posed at the beginning. Can't Indigenous people talk about education, not just Indigenous education? Because all of our children have those hearts and those spirits, and all the advice that you give us here. I was getting messages from people privately as well saying every single educator in this province needs to hear this man. Everyone needs to feel the love and the humility and the kindness. And actually, I've made the executive decision that we're actually not going to do Q&A, if you're okay with that, because I think that you've said it all. You've given us so much to think about and reflect on, and the chat is going crazy with all the beautiful thoughts that people are reflecting back to you because of all that you've shared with us. So I just want to say I was lost in your stories. It was incredible, and we just are so grateful that you continue to be so real and so you. Thank God you don't believe in straight lines. So glad you're always still gently disrupting, and so glad you don't have a 5-point plan. So with that, Ishnish Pinamat. Thank you, Sean.